Hello. Welcome to the Dynamics 365 show. For today's show, we are talking with Dani Kahil. He's a Dynamics 365 practice lead at Empire Limited in Brisbane, Australia. We're going to dig deep on drawing and rolling out simple to complex requirements or gathering requirements for Microsoft Business Application Project. It's an interesting discussion where we talk everything from tools and techniques to making sure you gather the right requirements from customers, whoever that customer might be, on a project. But let's take a moment to talk about automation and how geospatial intelligence can help reduce field engineer visits, especially when it comes to monitoring assets. Let's say a utility company has a power line down your street and they need to make sure that the trees and vegetation never grow too close to those lines. With MapTasker, you can set a geofence around that power line and the system will automatically check whenever new aerial or satellite data is available. MapTasker will then automatically run an algorithm to determine how close the tree or vegetation is to the power line, and if it is over a tolerance trigger, a workflow to create a work order for an engineer to cut back the tree line will be generated. Automation makes asset management more effective and more efficient, freeing up time and resources to focus on more important and meaningful work. To find out how MapTasker can help your business use automation to assist in monitoring, contact the team at maptasker.com for a demo or check out their YouTube channel for inspiration. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/126. Hey Dani, welcome to the Dynamics 365 show.
Hi Mark, great to be on the show.
Good to have you here. Listen, tell me, where does that accent of yours come from?
Yeah, look, difficult to hide, right? So, French. So basically my first language is French. And then I speak a couple of other languages as well, but that's the one that I cannot hide. So yeah, that's the one.
So you live in Australia now, right? Is it Brisbane? Is that right?
Yeah, well, I work from the Brisbane office. Where I actually live is on the Gold Coast.
Oh, man.
You're not sure if you know where it is, but...
You must be wealthy. You must be wealthy living on the Gold Coast.
Well, compared to Sydney, yeah, it's still cheaper than Sydney, for instance, right?
Way cheaper. Way cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. So I was in Sydney actually for 2.5 years, and then we basically wanted to move where it's a bit hotter and a little bit cheaper, to be honest, as well. And that's why we kind of relocated to the Gold Coast. But I work primarily from the Brisbane office or from home or from some clients here as well. We actually have some clients here on the Gold Coast, so that's pretty handy.
Nice. So how do you handle, when you get invaded by all the schoolies?
Oh, look, yeah, you get used to it, right? I mean, and yeah, that's really the center, right? Surfers Paradise and all those. There we live a bit outside where it's more family friendly and so on.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I didn't even notice it, to be honest.
So tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I have 2 girls and a wife. So... yeah, I mean, first, so we relocated to Australia 3.5 years ago. The first year was a bit tough. We were in Belgium before, so my accent French. So basically, I worked a couple of years in Belgium, and then so we relocated to Australia. So the first year was a bit tough for the whole family, especially for the kids. They were not knowing the English and so on. So it was a little bit rock and roll the first year. But then, yeah, now it's great. I mean, my little one, she's 5.5. She's basically Australian, right? I mean, she speaks like an Australian and everything. She still speaks a little bit French and Dutch, but she's basically Australian. And yeah, I mean, it's great here on the Gold Coast, right? You have the beach, you have the hinterlands. So we like to go outside and hike and discover new places. So it's really an amazing place, yeah.
And so what were you doing? You said it was Brussels. Is that where you were based?
Yeah. I was based in Brussels a couple of years. Yeah, I was born in Congo originally. Born in Congo, grew up there, went back to study in Poland, and then via an opportunity, actually worked a year in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And then back in Poland to finish my studies, then worked in Belgium, in Congo, and then again in Belgium, and then now in Australia.
Wow, very international. I just last weekend I was actually in for the first time, went to Brussels and Bruges.
All right,
So
yeah. Good
that was
beers,
very
good
nice.
chocolates.
Yeah. I didn't get into the chocolates. It just seems like there was so many to choose from. But the beer, yes,
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
definitely. I think I
definitely.
had at least 8 different beers. So yeah, not too bad.
Yeah. They're good with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good, very good. So today's episode, we're talking about, gathering requirements for projects, and really I want to drill into your understanding, what you found kind of works well for you. So tell us about, what the role generally I would say sits with a functional consultant, but also oftentimes with an architect on a project. Tell me about what you see are the key things when gathering requirements for a project.
Yeah, so look, maybe let's also cover a little bit the why, right? Why I
Mm-hmm.
think it is critical and so important, right? So indeed, I'll confirm it sits with senior functional or the lead
Mm-hmm.
functional on the project or the architect. I think, look, now going also in delivering more agile projects, everyone should, I think, have a good understanding of at least some of the techniques, and
Yeah.
why understanding and challenging some requirements is so important. So really the why, I mean, you get quite a lot of project as well. They can be delivered on, I mean, we have delivered all the requirements on paper, tick all the boxes, and then somehow you end up at the end of the project and you just feel that, I mean, it's you didn't deliver everything. The adoption is a bit poor. There is some rework and everything was ticked off. So I think really understanding the requirement, not really the word understanding is a bit, we should get into a shared understanding with the clients, with the partner, with all the stakeholders about what we're going to deliver. So really the key thing is to get a shared understanding of those requirements and what are we actually going to solve, right, using dynamics.
Mm-mm-mm.
So this is kind of the key, and as I said, I think it sits with multiple roles. I think everyone on the project, especially now with agile, right, where you have kind of your team and everybody is doing, and you still have developers doing specific things and so on, but most of your development team should be at least aware of some of the techniques, and challenge a bit the requirements, right, understand the why and
Mm-mm-mm.
understand the context of why the clients want to do this or that.
So you said challenge the requirements, and I've seen situations where, it's almost like the requirements that the customers provided have been cut and pasted out of another document. Nobody in the customer side's really validated them. They said, yeah, that's what you want. And you start getting into them and you're like, what the heck? Are you serious? You want this? And then you start getting these comments. Oh, no, I don't know. Who put that in there? So it's almost like there's that first process of going through and really validating, is this really a requirement or is it not, before you even start, going to that next layer? How do you handle it?
Yeah. Look, the first thing I really try to when we get a piece of paper, right, with some requirements written down, even if they are written in a perfectly nice manner,
Mm-hmm.
what I do during the first session, and everybody doing it their own thing, but what I do, I spend an hour on using, and it's an old technique, right? But it's kind of visual. I use use case diagrams from it's a UML diagram, right? Where you
Yep.
have basically your actors and all the actions that needs to be performed by those actors in the system, and it's very visual, right? So it kind of reminds the people in the room, the stakeholders, of what are the key actions that the system must do, so that to make sure we didn't miss anything obvious, right? So the first thing is really, did we cover all the main topics or main requirements that we need to deliver? And the actors is basically already kind of giving you a sense of the roles that will play in the system. And actually, I almost, when there is automation required, one of my actors is actually dynamics as well. So when I have some automation, there is a client sending an email and Dynamics has to reply automatically. There should be an auto response with that case number or whatever. That's for me already Dynamics as an actor is doing that action, so that I also have Dynamics in there to have this. And there already sometimes, of course, we get things that are not on the requirements paper. You get already some discussions, and funny, I mean, it happens quite often that between stakeholders already they are not completely, and you kind of feel that in the room. They kind of, either look at each other in a funny way, or they kind of challenge each other as well, or challenge their ideas. And you already
Agreed.
pick that, well, these requirements that you just draw on a dashboard. It's kind of helped me also thinking and, understanding that requirement. You already can kind of pick that there will be some more investigation that will need to be done on that requirements, because already internally kind of, they don't really agree, or they have different visions about that. So my first thing is really that use case diagram, right? To start that shared understanding, and also to kind of, get their ideas, right? To start because the diagram is kind of is visual, right? What I like about diagrams is that they are visual and they inspire people to give ideas, right? So that's really my key one, yeah.
Excellent. So you mentioned roles, and I take it as part of your UML diagram, you would then have your processes, right? Which is the business process. So
Absolutely.
So apart from roles, tell me the other key things you're documenting out during this process.
Yeah. So the use case diagram, definitely. What I also cover in the initial sessions is basically I want to understand the business plan. Where is that company going to, right? I need to feel a bit what is the company doing. Probably if I have those information before, I won't ask, and I try to get that before. But it's always good to confirm with the business stakeholders, where is that company going, right? What is the plan for that company a couple of years forward, if they know, if they can already share with me. So this is something I confirm with them as well. So before going to the diagrams, I start to ask those questions, or I try to get those. So the business plan, what are the challenges they're trying to solve? Because basically they start working with us because they have some challenges. They want to implement Dynamics for something, right? So what are they expecting Dynamics to solve? What kind of problem is Dynamics going to solve? Or what they think that Dynamics will solve for them? So I want to understand that as well. The key success factors, I think, for a project. So that's kind of the third. So I always have those three, right? The business plan, the issues or the challenges trying to solve, and the key success factors. So once I got those three, I start my diagrams, or use case first and those three later, whatever. But it should be on the same session. And then later you have more advanced session with you from your UML diagrams. What I do for the most complex actions, as you said, I draft my business process flows with swim lanes. So the actors are now in the swim lane, so that I understand a bit the process. That will help me already. What that will give me is an understanding already of kind of in Dynamics how you translate that. That will give me understanding of some of the entities, right, that we're going to use. So in the same, I mean, almost simultaneously, what I do is I already start capturing a draft entity diagram, just, as a draft, so that I can kind of, start building my design and start building my ideas. So I have my UML, my business process flow, my entity diagram. And then the last one, which is, for me, the one I use, and I'll explain a bit more during workshops, but I have a 4 diagram that I use all the time that I call the conceptual diagram.
Oh, sorry, what type of diagram?
The conceptual diagram. That's the 4th one I use. And this one is almost like a plan, or it's not a plan, is an image of your dynamics implementation, with the big blocks. For instance, if it's a case management system, then you have your contacts, you have your queues, your case, like in blocks, and this diagram, it's a diagram that I build over a couple of weeks, months, or almost, right? I start with a draft, and then we build it together with the client. So that's one diagram that I build along the way. And before each workshop, I'll get to that in a minute when I discuss a bit workshops, but before each workshop, I take that diagram again. That's helping me explaining how I understand the system, but also I want to get a shared understanding. I want to get my stakeholders to see how I understand their system and bring them to provide me ideas to build that diagram with them, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What you've talked about these diagrams, these 4 diagrams that you're using. What's the actual software tools that you're using as part of this? Are you just doing this all in a Word document, all in PowerPoint? What are you using?
Yeah, mostly Visio, but yeah, funny enough.
Visio, did you say?
yeah, Microsoft
Yeah,
Visio, yeah. But funny enough, lately we had an update that had to be installed on our PC, so Visio was not starting. So I use PowerPoint, for a conceptual diagram. I just take PowerPoint and put some blocks. Cause I needed it ready for a workshop, and Visio was not starting, right? So you can use PowerPoint as well if you don't have Visio. Visio is, I mean, it's easier and faster because the connectors are there. You don't have to, it's a bit lengthier using PowerPoint. That's the tool I use.
Excellent, excellent. And so when you are going in and you're starting this engagement with the customer, how do you make sure you get the right actors in the room? In other words, that you get the various roles, because oftentimes they're not invited to these meetings, In other words, whoever's initiated the project, they've got their vision of what it should be. Sometimes they've never communicated with the end users inside the organization. They're going to end up working with the technology. How do you kind of go about facilitating that you really do have the right people, that you've got kind of the role diversity from that organization engaged?
Yeah, well, it's during the first workshop you kind of try to get the key users, right, of those applications. You have frank discussions with your product owner or with your stakeholders, and you advise, look, can you really explain me the challenges of this role and what is that requirements about? And most of the time, the client wants to help, right? So he will invite that key, or he knows who that key person might be, to be honest. So if you say that up front, because that's basically the first session or the first couple of sessions, you kind of work probably with some main key stakeholders, but that when you go to the details, then they kind of realize they are themselves a bit stuck. So maybe the next session, or we kind of, have a meeting just to clarify some very specific requirements that the other key person might know. So this is how I handle it. To involve as well and key user that do specific tasks. What sometimes I propose to my product owner as well is that we call shadowing. So what it means is really sitting almost next to that user and seeing how they work. Doesn't have to be long, right? An hour, just to see how they operate, and sometimes it is very valuable to make you almost feel how that person is working and the pain they are having now, dealing with some of old applications, I use this as well.
So, I've used shadowing very effectively. I'm interested for you, help me visualize what's going on when you're shadowing. I want to know, are you taking notes? Are you taking photos? What are you doing? What's your kind of capture, input, that type of thing that you're going to use to build out what you're going to propose solution-wise? Help me visualize what your process is there.
Yeah, sure. Look, and maybe you can, since you have done it a couple of times, right? Maybe you can complement and help me as well, right? So last time I did it, so basically just a piece of paper. I mean, a notebook to write some notes. I was sitting next to a customer service agent, but that customer service agent was doing many things, right? So it's almost as at the reception. We have built a prototype of Dynamics, and I wanted to see a bit, and we gave the training, and I wanted to see a bit how she was using it. And I was super surprised the way she started using also Dynamics, I learned a lot. So basically we built some nice, you open your email from your queue, you qualify that email, you create a case, you follow the nice business process flow that we put for you in place, and so on. And then the reality on the ground, she opened the email. The time that she opened the email, she got a phone call, she opened 10 other screens in the browser, then half an hour later, or 15 minutes later, she went back to Dynamics. She closed the email that she opened, was a bit lost, opened it again. So, and then you kind of realize that, and then she got a person coming at the reception at the same time. So, and then you kind of feel that what you maybe have to do for that user is almost, convert that email to a case, let it sit there, and then having a couple of fields to fill in, and that's it, or something. I didn't, we're still working on those, but it made me realize that sometimes seeing the pain of that user, it's really, because we sit down on workshops also with that user, right? And getting the requirements, but visualizing how they work really helped out to understand. So I'm also interested by your experience, by the way, if how do you do it?
Yeah, so for me, I prefer using an iPad, and what I want to be doing. So I have OneNote open, and I'm saying, listen, you just do your job, and so I'm sorry, when I do shadowing, it's generally before the dynamic solution is built or the Power Platform solution is built, right? So we're talking about what are they currently doing? What is their current processes? And like a couple of things I'm measuring, I'm wanting to know how long is it taking? I want to understand those interruptions they're getting. I want to understand where they abandon a process because of an interruption, like you were talking about there. And I'm taking a lot of photos. So like I would take, and I wouldn't get them to screenshot. What I would do is that I would take a photo, with the iPad of the screen that they're currently on. So I've got it straight into my application. Then I'm making notes over the top of that image, with the pen feature. And the reason is that I really want to understand if they're, whatever the process was. And the last one that kind of comes to mind, they were running a sales team and they were scheduling outbound calls by suburb for a home installation product. And so what I was looking at, okay, this entire process, measuring the time, hearing, and then I'd ask questions. What's, if you could solve one thing about what you're doing here in this process, what would it be? Because what I find is often those people have thought many times about how they would improve it, And so often when I would go back and reflect to management what I was suggesting, they would then run it past their team, and their team would be like, "That's exactly what we want," And it was because, mate, they're telling you, right? The people at the coal face
absolutely.
really know what it is. And then when I would go back and let's say do a show tell session, what the art of the possible and what could this now look like, this process, this area of the system, of course. What I'd be looking at doing is how can I make them more productive, shave time, automate what I could within that process and get their buy-in. And of course, it's very easy with the Power Platform to just demonstrate, particularly around automation functionality, massive value very quickly, very scalable value. So yeah, I mean, I love shadowing techniques, and it's not that you can shadow the whole project, but it's for specific business process areas. It's such a great way to uncover the real challenges, problems, and of course then the opportunities to solve those.
Yeah. Well, thanks you for sharing, Mark. It's good tip.
Awesome. So let's talk about templates. Do you have like your secret template folder when you start any projects? That here are your templates that they might have had years and years and years of little updates and little tweaks and little improvements being made. Just walk me through what are your top 5 templates. Tell me about what software, like are they Word, Excel, that type of thing, and then kind of a bit of description of what do these templates do.
Yeah. So look, like I said, I'm very visual. So some of my templates are definitely those artifacts. Look, they cannot be reused from one project to another, or not completely, because you have to rebuild those based on specific requirements, right? But those I always use, right? And when you talk about templates, those are more graphical templates, but they end up in a high-level solution design anyway, or in some kind of or a blueprint document, something. Especially now in Agile, we don't want full-blown, because I'm doing mostly Agile projects, so we don't do this massive design documents anymore, but at least something like a blueprint where I have, those diagrams are in there, right? Definitely the entity diagram, the conceptual diagram, some of the processes, an architectural diagram as well in that solution blueprint, and then some of the other tools I use almost on all my project now is DevOps, Azure DevOps, right?
Yep.
So it's not sure if I respond to your question with Word and Excel. It's more now those kind of software. Azure DevOps comes, free, and I think you get 5 users for free, and then it's quite cheap to buy and extend, right? So I use Azure DevOps to write up we used Azure DevOps to write up our stories and acceptance criteria in there, right? So those are kind of the artifacts we'll be using, other than, of course, test plans and again, so now test plans, we use actually Azure DevOps as well for those. So yeah, so those will be the key ones, mostly Azure DevOps, some of the diagrams. Yeah.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there, and I'm a big proponent of using Azure DevOps for this type of thing. And you talked about acceptance criteria, and in many agile projects I've been on, I have not seen acceptance criteria that involved a usability element to it. In other words, I've seen, field A was needed on a form. Field A was placed on the form. It meets the acceptance criteria. Field A is on the form. It validates, has a correct security role, that type of thing. The fact that field A is you have to scroll for 3 pages down to find field A because it's been tacked on to the end of some form, after its acceptance. There's no kind of, is this the best place for field A? Is it the most usable? Is it the most logical? Is it the most intuitive? I'm not seeing that in acceptance criteria. How do you address that type of thing, especially when it's not just you working on a project, right? You've got an agile team. There's a range of, from the product owner to the stakeholders to the contributors that are involved. How do you make sure that usability is a key part of acceptance criteria?
Yeah, it's a funny one. Not sure if you can document that in acceptance criteria, so to speak. How we get those, right? How we get those is mostly with prototyping and mock-up. So look, what I do most of the time anyway is when I start a project, I spin. So I have my own instance, but sometimes I spin another one as well, just a playground, a sandbox, right? Where I can do whatever I want. And sometimes we prototype screens almost live, or I'm not doing everything, but I prepare a bit and I mock up some of the fields and we play around on some of the sessions with the user, where are the tabs and where are some fields should be placed and so on. But it's true. We don't document them. You can put them in with section. You want to have some fields. This we put, right. You want to have, if that's very important, if you want to have a field in that section or in that tab, you can put them there. But the particular scenario that you're mentioning, to scroll, somewhere, I'm not documenting that, right? Oh yeah, but it's
interesting.
You do it in a way.
No, like as in like I've run some good sized teams, and this is one of the things that I have often flagged, addressed, and said, I'm fine that you've got the field, and yes, it meets your acceptance criteria. I just think your acceptance criteria is wrong. As in, it's only half there, because at the end of the day, is it being placed in a way that is highly usable for the person? I'm a big thing of, what is the person that didn't go on this journey of having this bit of software design built for their processes? So the people 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the track that come across and use it, do they curse the person that built the system, right? Do they use the system in anger because the person that's designed the field in that place, that did that type of build, configuration, layout, just really didn't think about what the implication on that poor person that has to use the system day in, day out for the next 5 years, what their life's going to be like? An acceptance criteria ticks a box and says, you requested a field, it was validated, it's there. It doesn't address the issue of, is it usable by that poor person, 3, 4, 5 years down the track? So just an interesting thing. And I was going to ask a bit more about mock-up and prototype, but I think you've really covered that well. Tell me about running effective workshops. What are kind of the key things that you feel need to happen for an effective workshop to be run?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I always kind of start, and I always assume I want to give a bit of a reminder to the users or the key stakeholders in the workshop. So, and probably some are new or they're switching as well. So what I always do is kind of, if it's not clear, I come back to my key success factors, at least that. I say, look, the management team, we have decided, or your management team has decided those are the key success factors, so that it's always there almost. Second one is always my conceptual diagram, or the conceptual diagram that we have built together with the client, and then explain kind of very quickly sometimes, because sometimes those people are the same and they are used to, but I just want to give a reminder, this is what we're building, contact case. And so that's kind of a nice visual to kind of start getting them, into the mood of sharing ideas. And then I say, and today for this workshop, we're going to cover that particular element or that box on this diagram and those rules. And the purpose for me is to, complete the user stories and write down the acceptance criteria. And I explain what is an acceptance criteria so that we get a shared understanding of what is the purpose of my workshop. So I always start with kind of a step back a bit to picture the high level solution we're building, and then what exactly we're going to address during that workshop. And again, workshop, as I said, I'm very visual. So diagrams, sharing screens, mock-ups. You can write down rules, right? There is things you have to write down, like, rules or specific acceptance criteria that needs to be met. You have to write them down. But other than that, I use a lot of visual tools like diagram and mock-ups during my workshop, so that, that kind of feel that I want to, excite a bit the users and get them to share ideas so that we get to a shared understanding. And again, it's the same word, right? It's shared understanding of what we're building. So that's the one. Look, there is one thing that is, and I'm checking that out. I've never experienced it. It's funny. There is some people using Lego,
mm-hmm.
Boxes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's called Lego Serious Play. I'm just for fun, I would like to give it a try one day, I read a little bit about it. Not sure if it can be completely applied to dynamics and so, but I would like to give it a try. Don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah, so I was involved in Hong Kong on a project that we use it as a part of the initial coming up with, if you like, that shared understanding of what wanted to be built. So what we did is, imagine a boardroom conference table, and we had people in the room, about 20 different people representing different parts of the business. So it was for a major, if not the largest watch company in the world. And what we had is people from marketing, we had people from sales, we had people from IT, we had people from logistics, operations, retail storefronts, management, all the different stakeholders. And we handed out a little bag of Lego to each person in the room, and the Lego blocks made up a Lego duck, okay? So there weren't many parts, but what we asked them to do is that if they could visualize what they saw this implementation being, and then in this case we're building a loyalty system, we wanted them to build their duck with the visualization of what they wanted this system to be. Right now, of course, 15 minutes later, everyone's built their duck and not a single duck looks the same of everybody. And now here's the beauty, right, is that then we went around the room and got everybody to explain why their duck looked the way it did. And this is where the power comes out. And because it's tactile, it's visual, etc., is that people, I remember the IT guy basically built his just as a square block. And, apart from the yellow and the black bricks, the kind of thing, it was hard to tell, it was a duckling, by the way, pink. Sorry, that's where the color. And so it was hard to tell it was a duck. And he was like, I want the system to be solid. I don't want it to be breakable. I want it to be robust, right? Now, those are all words that you don't get in a list of requirements, right? Yeah. And then, and then everybody, like from marketing to sales, came with totally different interpretations of how they created their duck and what it meant to them. One person's duck was just the bricks all in a long line. I wanted it to be far-reaching. I wanted to integrate to every part of the organization. Like, wow, those are really interesting stories. So what it does is it really allows people to unlock what they have inside them, but they don't know how to articulate in just writing out words in an Excel spreadsheet or a document on a list of requirements, right? It's those kind of states of thinking, and that's what the Lego kind of experience unlocks. So incredibly powerful. And I mean, and a lot of these tools come from human-centered design or design thinking processes. And I tell you, for me, I believe more partners need to look seriously at design thinking when running projects, because this whole part of requirements gathering, of understanding what people really are looking for, gets unlocked. And of course, design thinking is you've talked about being very visual in the way you work. Design thinking is 100% visual. It's diagrams, it's post-it notes on walls, it's understanding people. How do they think, feel, work with, understand, what are people saying. It's these very human type behaviors when building software. And so yeah, I think, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I do recommend it.
Thank you for explaining. It's good.
Okay, so tell me, when you're moving into then documenting, because often customers do want something documented, even in an agile world. What's your kind of minimum that you've found effectively to get by when it comes to providing documentation agile?
Yeah, well, so some of my documents that evolve during that project, some of those diagrams are definitely part of that documentation. So you started with the draft and then they evolve throughout the whole project. Entity diagram, the conceptual design, the business process flow, you provide all this, right? What we also tend to do is, so what I tend to do is describe a bit the logic that we put under some of the entities, some of the, the logic. So we use also the descriptions fields, right, in Dynamics as well, so that we can easily extract those and furnish that documentation, although sometimes it can be a bit massive for the client. If you're going to extract every single field, every single view, you end up with a document of 600 pages, right? But yeah, so definitely describing a bit the logic as well that we put in place behind some of the entities and some of the fields in workflow as well. We try as a team to have those descriptions in there, so those are kind of the documents, I would say the minimal documents we furnish. As you said, you have to give a bit of documentation, especially the logic that you put in place, the decisions, right? Most of the time we document the decisions as well. When I run workshop, most of the time I send out the minutes as well of that workshops, so that I have a trace of so that we have a trace of the decision we made eventually on that workshop and so on. So those are documents we store, right? And we can refer back at the end.
No, really good. So now taking your requirements and you start to, build out those in the Power Platform. And you've got to make decisions around, so for example, in reporting, are you going to use views as a form of reporting? Are you going to offer reporting on forms? Are you going to use reporting via dashboards? Are you going to use Power BI, right? You have a rich tool set just for reporting. And then, there's the thing of what should be a canvas experience, what should be a model-driven experience, where should you be leveraging flow to really interact with data sets outside the specific system? And one of the concerns I have is that when you have consultants that are very focused on one thing, so let's say they say, I know Dynamics CRM or CE, they come from that background. And why I highlight this is on a project recently involved, and we did out the data model of how we saw the technology working. And then the consultants started deciding on whether they should build it in Dynamics Field Service, Dynamics for Sales, Dynamics for Customer Service. And I was like, why are you starting even at this point? Shouldn't you be starting at the common data service and looking at how you build it from there? Because you don't really need to use any of these apps. And so what I found is that consultants that only know one thing, and it's human nature, it's not just consultants, human nature is to always talk with authority on what you know. But the problem is there's a lot more to know nowadays. And so how do you start making those broad decisions, that this piece of functionality should really sit in SharePoint, or this should sit in Teams, or this should be part of, CDS? How do you start making sure you're making the right long-term decisions in the advice you're giving to your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, look, it's a critical one, right? That you don't get into the silos and your own thinking. So, look, most of the time on our projects as well, what we have is, we call it solution governance anyway, but it's task, or it's time that we spend with other specialists as well in the organization to exchange idea exactly on those requirements where you kind of not 100% Well, you feel, yeah, it is probably Dynamics, but maybe there is other options. And we had the situation lately where with one of my architects, I was sharing, I mean, with one specialist and architect, we were sharing some ideas. And then I was thinking, is just to give you an example, I was thinking to store documents, well, with the new Dynamics licensing, right? Now we can store
Yep.
documents in Dynamics, right? I mean, the cost, you have way more storage. So, why should we even integrate with SharePoint, right? But then the architect, look, if they need to modify those documents, right? At least you have the versioning directly. They don't have to download these documents and then update it and re-upload it again. It's just easier if they have it in SharePoint. They can edit it there, right? So those are the ideas. And this one is a little bit still related to Dynamics, but the solution is actually SharePoint, right? Here I thought I will store it in Dynamics, but then basically, so we have those exchange of thoughts with other, and sometimes even specialists sitting outside of the project, right? And across multiple projects that are just providing this global view. And as you said, right now it's basically the Microsoft platform that you have to think about all the time, right? So it's not even Dynamics and CDS, it is above that even, right? You have to think about what's in Azure, what Office Suite can leverage for you, right? Because some of the things can be done in Azure as well, right? So it's that thinking, and it's true, it's difficult, right? But what we try to do is having those conversation at times during the project to get another vision from other architecture or other specialists to validate your thinking, right? And as you said, a lot of time, the solution actually now resides somewhere else, right? Or there's an easier way to do it somewhere else. Does that respond to your question?
No, that's good. That's good. I like it. I like it. Listen, I'd like to shift gears slightly and talk about starters, right? People coming into the industry, they might be grads or they might be people doing career changes, and they're finding themselves in the role of understanding requirements, running workshops, and being integral to projects that involve Microsoft business applications. What do the grads need to get up to speed on around how to gather requirements effectively? What tools can you recommend that they go do as a point of action from listening to this?
Yeah. Look, well, there is an official, the International Institute of Business Analysis. You can get some tips in there, right? There is some certification you can do there, definitely. How I do it as well. I mean, there is plenty of nice videos and courses on LinkedIn. So personally, I go there. There's good podcasts as well, like the Dynamics podcast you're running and all the other MVP. There is some business analysis specific podcasts that are great, are just incredible, right? And I kind of listen to those podcasts as well. So that's another source where you can go when you can go about. Look, also what I think is, I mean, it's also kind of a skill set in a sense that you need to be a bit curious. You need to really know what the why. You almost want to know. It's almost the question you want to ask all the time. Give behind your requirements, give me your context, give me the why. Why do you want to do this way, and what does it give you? So you need to be curious, right? You need to want to understand how this business is running next to the certification, right? I think that's a critical skill set that you need to have. Because if you're not, then you probably won't get the answers you probably need,
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Be curious is, man, that just resonated with me, and keep asking why. Wow, I love it. Good. Is there any formal training that you know of or can recommend? Is there anything else that for somebody starting out that you would, if they came to you and said, what should I do to learn this as quickly as I can? Any other recommendations you'd make?
Not apart from the one I just gave you, I think you should know as well, especially as a Dynamics consultant, right? You have to know perfectly the standard apps that are coming with all the features there. I mean, I think if you want to challenge properly the requirements and guide your users and your stakeholders to stay in a clean, easy to manage solution and avoid, unnecessary complexities and customization, not to rebuild something that exists actually out of the box almost, because it happens, unfortunately, it happens, that you have to know. I think, yeah, that's a critical one. Now, it's a bit difficult to know all of them perfectly. I mean, you choose, then you choose, right? I mean, I specialize in customer service. That's the one I want to master. Definitely the certification will help you get that knowledge, right? So I just did recently the customer engagement one, the new one that I found actually quite, it was probably the most difficult one I did until now. The level, I think, increased a bit. Customer service, that's the next one on my list. And I mean, you have to know those as well, even if they are a bit theoretical. I mean, when you have and discuss those requirements with your users, because you study those and practice those, you know what is in standard. You can almost directly interact with your users and say, well, that is a standard feature, no worries. Or this is a standard feature that could cover, maybe we could do it that way. And then we don't have to develop a plugin, or we don't have to bend your system to respond to use 100% of your need, but maybe we can meet, 95%, and we are completely standard, right? So, the pure Dynamics application, the feature, that's a must, I think, in my opinion.
I like it. Okay, let's move on to some quick fire questions just to wrap up with. And these questions are designed to put you on the spot, and so kind of think about what the first thing is that pops into your mind when I ask the question. Okay, so you're ready for number one?
Let's see. Yeah, shoot.
Okay, have you been told you look like someone famous, and if so, who was it?
Oh, so I'm not sure if it's famous for everyone. My wife is always saying I look like a soccer player called Robert Lewandowski, which is a Polish soccer player. Because she said I don't really look like Polish, she would imagine, but when she saw that player, but you look, so you are Polish. You look like him, or almost like
Awesome.
him, right? So, yeah.
I like it. If you could go anywhere next year, where would it be?
Next year, right. Look, that's probably a little bit, I'll probably play a bit with you on asking you a bit more to clarify your question, if you don't mind. Going forward for holidays?
Yeah, for a holiday, anywhere in the world tomorrow. Anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
For a holiday next year, where would it be?
Right. I would go to Japan.
Japan. Nice.
Yeah, I've never been there. It's kind of a bit different. So it's actually the next one on the list. So I would go there, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Who's the worst boss you've ever had, and why?
Oh.
You don't have to say their name. But you can if you want.
Oh my God, the worst boss, my dad, maybe. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, but why?
Oh, it's difficult when you work with family stuff. It's tough because so I work with him. So I worked a couple of years in Congo, kind of for his company. I was doing my own thing, right? Implementing actually Dynamics for companies in Congo. And I was running as well in his company. And, my dad can be sometimes, can be a bit sometimes, direct and very straightforward in business and so on. And when it's family, it's difficult. I mean, he will get that, but you kind of, you kind of get a bit hurt by that as well. So, I would pick my dad, yeah.
Okay. What's the most surprising self-realization you've had?
Surprising, right?
Yeah, self-realization you've had.
I think lately realizing that failure makes you grow. In a sense, until a lot I was avoiding kind of failure and trying to be perfect and so on, and you kind of realize that sometimes failing, or what you think failing, makes you grow and makes you learn a lot. So it's almost like I want to learn how to quickly fail and how to fail well, in the sense, and adapt that mentality so that I can fail more often and grow way faster, or improve way faster. That was kind of a couple of months or a year ago where it's kind of switched. And
it's good. What's the best gift you've ever received?
Oh, the best gift I ever received. Well, I'll go with the one I just received lately that I kind of liked. Not sure if the best, but it's definitely something useful. Is actually some wireless speakers or wireless earplugs that go go in the water that are waterproof. So it's nice because basically what I can do now is listen to my podcast or whatever I want when I swim. So I used to either walk and listen to things. Now I can actually swim and do my exercise and listen to interesting podcasts. So that was kind of a nice thing. Yeah, I picked this one.
Awesome. If you could recommend a guest for a future podcast, to come on as a guest, who would you recommend?
Yeah. Well, the list could be long, right? I mean, well, if I look internally, right? So I work for Empire. The specialists that we have are really awesome. I always have great advice and I always learn a lot from them. So Rowan Miller from Empire and Guy Riddle, our solution specialist. You might have known Guy, I think.
I know both of them.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah. So definitely great guest with huge amount of experience and knowledge around dynamics.
Fantastic. Dani, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Before you go, if people want to connect with you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. Look, that's the one. Yeah.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Dynamics 365 show. Full show notes on this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/126. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. Don't miss out anything I'm currently doing. Either subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/NZ365Guy or go to my website, nz365guy.com, and subscribe to my newsletter where I, release my announcements first at that location. Anyhow, I hope you found this episode helpful. If you've got any comments or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Do not be afraid to get in touch. Bye for now.